3 months. That's how long I've just spent behind the wheel of this Hyundai Kona. And it's not just any Kona. I know it looks kind of fancy, but actually it's about the cheapest Kona money can buy, the entry-level petrol-powered model. And I know the hybrid and electric ones, they'll probably steal all of the headlines, but this one's got a few tricks up its sleeve as well. Plus, if you opt for this one, you'll save yourself a fortune. So, let me show you what I mean. So yes, this is the cheapest petrol-powered variant of the Hyundai Kona, but to be honest, there's so much bang for your bucks on offer here that it doesn't really feel like an entry-level model, and it really makes stepping up to the premium car seem like quite a big jump financially. This one is 32 grand, for example, while the more expensive Kona Premium is 39,500. And I don't know about you, but 7.5 grand isn't chump change in the Chesto household. And given the entry-level model arrives with 18-inch alloys, LED headlights, dual-zone climate control, a 12.3-inch central screen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, 6-speaker stereo with a wireless charge pad, and USB ports aplenty, I just don't know that I could justify that price jump. Sure, the premium car adds a 12.3-inch digital instrument display, a better Bose stereo, heated and ventilated power adjustable front seats, partial leather trim, and navigation, but to be honest, I haven't missed any of that so far. Well, to be honest, I have missed the leather seats a little bit, especially because my dog likes to slobber, but I haven't 7.5 grand missed them, if you know what I mean. So of course, this new Kona can be had in all sorts of flavors, from petrol to hybrid to fully electric, but Hyundai reckons the design started with the EV version, which then fed all of the other variants, rather than going the other way around where the EV turns up later on, which is why this petrol-powered model still looks a little bit electrified, doesn't it? What with this rounded front end and no visible grille. But I actually think it really works, giving this most old school of powertrains a sort of modern and almost electrified kind of vibe. Except of course, for this area here, which feels and looks a little plasticky and a little bit like something's missing. But overall, it's a pretty sharp looking package. Step into the Kona cabin and it still manages to hide its entry-level status pretty well. Yes, there are a lot of hard plastics around the place, but the way they've configured these screens to look like a kind of wall of tech, and this leather-wrapped steering wheel, all looks and feels pretty nice. These seats, by the way, are what Hyundai calls premium cloth, and I can tell you they feel, well, a lot like cloth. So given its dimensions, this new Hyundai Kona really does stretch the small SUV friendship. For reference, the bigger Hyundai Tucson's about 4.6 meters long and 1.8 meters wide, which really doesn't mean there's that much of a gap between the two models. So all that space is most keenly felt here in the back seat. I'm 175 centimeters and I've got miles of legroom. I can stretch out quite comfortably, and even CarsGuide Deputy Editor James Cleary, who is in fact a registered giant, reports ample headroom, and I can tell you there's plenty for me as well. That's not something you can say about all small SUVs. There's also more room in the boot, with the Kona reporting 407 litres with these seats in place, and that number growing to 1,241 litres when you fold them flat. So in real terms, I can tell you that means I can drop one of these seats and slide a 6-foot surfboard in here, no problem at all. We had this car over Christmas, stuffed it full of presents and the like. We've taken it camping, including like an off-road buggy to wheel things around. That all fit in, no problem at all. I even had my dad's 65-inch television, complete with this massive box, slid into the boot, no problem at all. So it really is bigger than you might think, and I can tell you that at no point over the past 3 months have I longed for a bigger car. So powering this cheapest of Kona models is a 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol engine, pairs with a CVT automatic and sends its power to those front wheels. And look, we'll get to this under the driving bit in just a minute, but it's not particularly exciting. Hyundai reckons you should see 6.6 litres per 100 kilometres on the combined cycle, but to be honest, I've been seeing more like 8.2 litres per 100, which again, actually isn't that bad. But it does accept the cheapest possible fuel, meaning the 47-litre fuel tank on board here is always under $100 to fill, which doesn't feel too financially crippling when you pull into the service station. So, life behind the wheel of this Hyundai Kona is really a tale of two cities, or one city and one country. In town, actually the outputs really don't feel underwhelming. There's more than enough grunt to get you around suburban streets, and it does it mostly fairly quietly, unless you really start to ask too much of it, and then it can drone a little bit. But I gotta say, I've put a lot of kilometers on this car, running from Sydney down to the south coast and back a couple of times for holidays over the break, and it doesn't really perform that well in a freeway environment. That's when it starts to feel a little bit underpowered and just a little bit like it's working too hard, and it does make overtaking maneuvers a little bit scary and a little bit noisy. I'll try to give you an example of what I mean by that. In the city, it's nice and quiet, it just kind of cruises around. But when you plant your foot, Suddenly that quiet little small SUV disappears and replaced by this loud, droning CVT automatic, just giving you that feeling that the engine and gearbox together are just working a little bit too hard. So again, in the suburbs, you don't really notice it, but you do notice it out of town, especially when you're trying to do overtaking maneuvers, because all that noise doesn't necessarily result in much more speed either. This car, or at least this powertrain in it, is really more of a city affair. Don't get me wrong, it's not entirely unmanageable and you pretty quickly stop noticing it altogether. But it's just a shame because this car is so surprisingly practical. It feels like it's been tailor-made for life in the city and for longer road trips. So small enough to sort of maneuver around city streets, super easy to park, but also big enough to take all sorts of stuff in the boot for long road trips or camping trips. It has a lot of practicality perks, this car. In the city though, I gotta say this does perform its duties pretty admirably. I'll be honest, it's not the most plush feeling SUV, and that goes both from the surrounds in the cabin and to the way it rides. It's not that it feels uncomfortable at any point, it just can feel a tiny bit brittle on those typically bad Sydney road surfaces. That said though, the steering's fantastic, always sort of inspires confidence. It's fairly direct but never overly sharp. And I've fallen kind of head over heels with the fuel use too. As I mentioned earlier, I'm averaging about 8 litres per 100, and to be honest, I'm actually pretty happy with that, given A, the way that I drive probably isn't the most fuel efficient way possible, shall we say, and B, the fact that given its tiny tank and the fact that it drinks the most cheap fuel, it's actually not that much of a burden to fill up either. I guess the easiest way to sum this one up is to say that the Hyundai Kona probably doesn't do anything outrageously well, but it also doesn't do anything outrageously poorly either. It's fairly middle of the road, and that actually makes it very easy to get to know, and that's that drone again, and allows it to slip into your life fairly easily too. So the Hyundai Kona is officially a 4-star ANCAP safety vehicle, and it's not because it doesn't have a whole bunch of active safety kit, but it's because the safety body found the performance of some of it, specifically the AEB, to be adequate, whatever that means. Now, how much that bothers you, whether it's a 4 or 5-star car, is entirely up to you. It doesn't bother me much at all. All the active safety stuff is present and accounted for, as are all the airbags. So the Kona, like all Hyundais, is covered by a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, but there's also a lifetime servicing plan with intervals pegged at 12 months or 15,000 kilometres, and the servicing cost set at $399. There are certain cars that just fit into your life, and this Hyundai Kona is one of them. And I mean that fit thing quite literally. Not once over the past 3 months have I lusted over a bigger SUV, and I have jammed all sorts of things into the boot of this car. So if you're in the market for a small but not too small SUV, the Kona should probably be on your shopping list.